This is Jon Burlingame. I write about film music for Variety. We're talking today with David Arnold about his score for Tomorrow Never Dies. David, what's your earliest memory of James Bond music?
James Bond music, probably tied in with my earliest memory of a James Bond film, which was You Only Live Twice. I saw that when I was about 7 years old. You know, within sort of 5 minutes, you've had the James Bond theme, you've had You Only Live Twice, the song, you've had Space March, and I think within those 6 minutes, I was hooked.
So let's jump ahead 30 years then. How did you come to work on Tomorrow Never Dies?
I don't think it was any secret at MGM that I was a fan of James Bond films and music especially. I think, and I'm not sure whether they were in negotiations with John Barry about the film or not, but there came a point when there was a phone call made saying that they needed someone to do the movie and would I be interested, and I didn't need much encouragement. But I made a point, like, you know, pretty much all the time. When I was doing the Shaken and Stirred album, I was sending stuff to Barbara Broccoli and I was sending stuff to Mike Sandoval over at MGM. And I think they knew the kind of area that I was moving in. You know, I was interested in trying to take the music kind of a step forward, as well as always sort of tipping your hat to where it's been before.
What is it about John Barry's style of scoring Bond films that we find so appealing and that appealed to you?
I think John's one of the few people where if you were to whistle the first 2 seconds of, you know, the songs that he's written, the music that he's written for this series of films, you'd instantly know what they are. I don't think there's that many composers who can sort of say that they can boast that about their of anything else that was going on in popular music.
That seems to me an interesting balancing act, because you, I guess, wanted to retain the kind of elements of the Bond style, but you needed to bring it up to date.
Well, I think that's what they've done with the movies, and if anything, you know, if you're being honest about what you're doing with the music as far as it relates to the film, then all you're doing is responding to what the film's asking you to do. All I knew was when I was watching it, I was thinking, if I'm watching this movie and I'm not scoring it, what would I want to hear at this point? And I knew that, you know, when James Bond comes out of somewhere and does something in a typical James Bond style or fashion, there's really only one thing that you want to hear, and that's James Bond music. I think it's foolish to run away from that.
What about the use of the James Bond theme specifically? Was that a challenge to either update or somehow contemporize specifically for this film?
Well, it's always, I mean, in a way it's a gift, because, you know, it's one of the most fantastic themes ever written, and obviously instantly identifiable, and it's a bit of a safety net. You know, it's like if ever you're in trouble, you play a variation on that, and somewhere in a Bond movie it's going to work for you. But there was also the fact that they didn't use it an awful lot in GoldenEye led to they were kind of went a little bit in the other direction and felt like they wanted to hear more of it in Tomorrow Never Dies, and trying to strike a balance between, you know, not playing the James Bond theme every time he does something, because, you know, there are other things to be saying.
I understand you scored the film in sections over a period of several months. Why was that necessary?
Post-production schedule was virtually non-existent. So what we did was, as they were shooting and assembling and kind of trying to cut the film as it was being shot, we had like a sort of 1 day spot session for the first third of it, for instance, and I'd go away and I'd write the first third and we'd record the first third, and then we go back and we'd spot the next part, you know. So by the time I finished writing, they'd shot another few 100,000 reels of film, and you know, they had the second act ready, which is why we had to do it like that. And it was interesting to do it like that in a way, because everyone could hear how it was going, and in this instance, I think Roger Spottiswoode, the director, was probably happier having having the time to be able to live with some of the music and, you know, decide what he wanted with the rest of it. And it also gave me a chance to see what was working and what wasn't working. So I mean, it's good in a way, but the downside of it is that you have you don't really know what's coming next. You know, you finish writing a scene without really knowing what the next thing is going to happen. And of course, none of the cast did. You know, they'd be filming a scene and not really knowing what the next line was going to be. So it was all a bit, you know, flying fairly close to the wind, I think, but seemed to work out in the end.
So you had, you actually worked on this for something like 6 months then, right?
Yeah, it was quite a long time. I did other bits and pieces in between, but it was, we were pretty much spending most of the time trying to get it right, and there was a lot of music in the film anyway. I think in retrospect, there was a lot about it that I quite liked, and part of it is that I do like to get involved with it and to feel like you're part of something rather than just kind of being tagged on at the end. You know, I do like going to the set. I do like talking to the producers and the directors and the actors and the special effects and the sound effects guys, and really trying to absorb everything that the film is supposed to be. It's just the way I like to do it.
How large an orchestra did you use?
I think we were around about 85. I think we dropped a few on certain days, but I think around about 80, 85 was our average size. We had quite a few percussionists, and we were running a rhythm section with like drums and bass and guitar as well alongside it, and all the synth pre-records I'd done in my little room at the top of the studio. So there's quite a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of people and a lot of air being shifted. You know, Derek, our principal trumpet player, who's an absolute genius, was there was a point where I needed a certain tone, and I remember speaking to him in a break, and I said, Derek, there was this thing in Thunderbolt where it was just like this, and he said, well, that was me. And you realise, you know, he said that he's played on every single Bond movie.
I understand you'll be scoring the next Bond film, is that true?
Yeah, The World Is Not Enough. It was very lucky, I think. Michael Wilson, on our last day of recording on Tomorrow Never Dies, it was like the last thing that we'd recorded. It was the last bar, and the orchestra was leaving, and everyone was quite happy. And he said, make sure you're not doing anything in 2 years' time. So I figured that was an invitation to do the next one, and sure enough, they did ask, and I was very happy to say yes. So you know, I'm very excited about it. I think it's a terrific film, and it gives us a chance to put this theory to the test of, you know, where do you take James Bond music? You know, in a way, it's a challenge, more of a challenge than Tomorrow Never Dies, because Tomorrow Never Dies for me was like everything probably that I've ever wanted to do in a Bond movie. I did, thinking that if I get run over by a bus when this is over, I don't want anything unsaid. And so now it's like, well, I threw so much at the last one, which was more of an, you know, I think Tomorrow Never Dies is certainly more of an action movie than anything else. But the World Is Not Enough is far more dramatic, even though it's still got, you know, the requisite amount of you know, action set pieces and stunts and all the things that you come to expect. But it's also very dramatic.
Looking back now at the whole experience of doing Tomorrow Never Dies, how do you view the whole experience?
I remember whilst I was in the middle of doing it thinking, I really don't like this at all, and then having finished it thinking, I actually completely loved that. But I tend to think like that quite a lot anyway when I'm doing film scores. They're never that pleasant when you're in the middle of doing them, but when they're finished you think, oh, it wasn't all that bad. You always think you're never going to do another one again. You know, I think I'm never, ever, ever, ever going to score a film again. That's it. I will drop down dead if I do another one. And, you know, a couple of weeks after it, you think, oh, it wasn't that bad. You know, and then a couple of weeks after that, you think, actually, I had quite a good time. You know, thinking about it now, I'm thinking I had a great time doing it. You know, it's like it's like being in a sweet shop. You know, you're doing a Bond movie.
Have you heard from John Barry? Do you know if he heard the score and what he thought of it?
Well, I speak to John Barry quite frequently, but I mean, I've never sort of felt like I could just say, oh, what do you think? I mean, I played him a few things, and he seemed quite happy with, with it, and that's really all I would ask of anyone, to say if they liked it or not. And I think he liked it. He was very generous with his praise on Shaken and Stirred, and in a way it was like an extension of that kind of thing. I don't know whether he was, whether he thought it was a good idea for someone to spend so much of their time recording his songs. That's what I felt like I felt like doing at the time, which is the reason why I made that record, because I loved the songs. And the reason why I scored the film is because I love the movies. And Jon, it's like without him, we wouldn't even be here talking about it, I don't think.
David, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, great. Nice to speak to you again, Jon.